I'm going to begin in Romans 8, but if you want to go ahead and turn to Genesis chapter 3, that's where we go camp out. Genesis chapter 3, but I got some introductory matters to address as we go. Last week we introduced a new series having to do with appetites. And we gave you the example of how I grew up in a home where we had rice every night and we had something fried. And so therefore, growing up, I was used to fried foods. So now, if presented fried foods as I was tonight, I am tempted to eat. Okay? But for those who do not care for the fried foods, those who prefer fruit and vegetables, or they just prefer baked or grilled, and they don't prefer the fried, then they're not as tempted. And we were talking about the fact that the point is that where there is a pre-existing appetite, only then can there be a temptation. You're not tempted to partake of something you have no appetite for. None. If you've never tried it, you never have an appetite for it, you don't have a taste for it. I've seen those who, they practically live on Red Bull energy drinks. I've never had one, don't want to taste one. I'm sure it probably gives you an energy kick for a while. And then you settle down. But so some of them have an appetite for that and they constantly guzzle them. But not me. But there's other things I do have an appetite for that they don't. So it's not a matter of me looking down on them religiously. It's a matter of all of us have things in which we have an appetite for. And if there is a pre-existing appetite, it can be active, or as we'll see tonight, it can be dormant. Either way. And we talked about the fact of the prodigal son, not teaching the prodigal son, but just the fact of what prodigal means. And prodigal means we automatically assume a prodigal is a wayward child who's out sowing their oats, living it up, spending all his wealth, all that kind of stuff. That's not the case necessarily. That was in that particular case. But a definition of a prodigal, asotos in the Greek, dissolutely in English, means lacking restraint, marked by indulgence in things that are deemed as vices, in particularly strong drink and promiscuous sex, but it can be any vice, any bad habit. So if we go unrestrained, we lack restraint in any area, and it's not just eating, it could be something we listen to, it could be something with our eyes. We are prodigal in that area, and that's where we pick up tonight. As we finished in Romans chapter 8 and verse 13, Paul says, by the Spirit, if you are living according to the flesh, you must die. But if by the Spirit of God you are putting to death the deeds of the body, you will live. For all who are by the Spirit of God being led, these are sons of God. He's saying that we need to be making a conscious daily effort to crucify these appetites, put to death the deeds of the flesh. He says if you do, then you'll experience the abundant kingdom life. It's life with vitality, if you will. With that in mind, how do you do it? Well, that's where grace comes in. In Romans chapter 8, verse 3 through 4, it says, for what the law could not do, weak as it was through the flesh, God did, sending his only Son in the likeness of sinful flesh as an offering for sin. He condemned sin in the flesh so that the requirement of the law might be filled in us, who do not walk according to the flesh, but according to the Spirit. And that's the key. And Jesus set the example. But what is the topic here having to do with the law? The law brought an awareness of what was wrong, but it was powerless to help you obey it. It's no different than that speed limit sign out there. It makes you aware of what the law says. Speed limit 55. But that sign gives you no power whatsoever to let up off the gas. But see, grace does. We talk about what grace is, unmerited favor. But what grace does is it's the empowering presence to be able to let up, to have restraint. Grace brings restraint. Okay? Now, Romans 5:20 says this, moreover, the law entered that the offense might abound. When the law came, when that speed limit sign came up, All kinds of people were speeding. Because before the sign came up, you weren't too sure about what the speed limit is. So maybe somebody, was taking it a little easy because it is a small town around here. So maybe they're going 45. But as soon as they see 55, next thing you know, they're going 65. Because where the law is, there is the temptation to break that law and see what you can get away with. That's what happened. He says, where the law abounded, where the law was in effect, the sin abounded. And we know that 1 Corinthians 15:56 says, the strength of sin is the law. Okay? So the law is good, but it doesn't give you any power to keep it. So you need grace. Well, in Romans 5:20 it says, but where sin abounded, grace did much more abound. And this is what you need to claim and say, thank you, Lord, for the grace to overcome any appetite, any bad habit, any issue, any temptation that I'm facing. Thank you, Lord, for the grace to empower me and equip me to overcome. Now it said where sin abounded. That word in the Greek is pleonazo. And that is an abundance, a huge abundance. I mean, as you know today, sin's running rampant. There's an abundance of it, but it's measurable. It's no different than these water towers you see here. These big old huge water towers. Well, there's an abundance of water in there, but you can measure how many gallons are in it. They got ways to, maybe there's markings on the side of the wall, or maybe they got the depth and they can figure about how deep the stick goes before it touches water. They can tell how many gallons are in that water tank. So it's an abundance of water, but it's measurable. But it says, where sin abounded, pleonazo, grace did much more abound. That's hupoperissio. So using the water illustration, hupoperissio has the imagery of raging rapids just flowing down like during a storm. A flood that's just going over the banks and flooding into the towns and communities, in yards and streets. He says grace, whereas sin abounds, but it's measurable. He says grace goes well beyond that. It does much more abound. So no matter how much we're struggling with, he says it's nothing compared to the grace that's available to you. So let's take that as we go from here. Because of my upbringing, I shared with you last week, and it wasn't being condemning on anybody else who has, because it was just what you were exposed to. You may not have been exposed to things I was. And I may not have been exposed to things you were. But I was just using me, for example, because that's the only one I know to mention as an illustration. Okay? And I mentioned because of my upbringing, I can testify that I have never tasted alcohol. Praise God. Because I never grew up around it. So I never tasted alcohol, and I never planned to. Why? Because I was never exposed to it. So I never developed an appetite for it when I was younger. It wasn't a matter of having a neighborhood kid, next door neighbor, and we had plenty of those. Nobody came over and said, hey, Charlie, I brought this from the house. My daddy has this in the refrigerator. You want to swallow? If I would have taken a swallow, unbeknownst to my parents, then I could have developed an appetite that here many years later, the devil could prey upon. But I never developed an appetite for it. So how can I say I never will, in Jesus' name? How can I say I never will when there are so many special occasions to celebrate, and as you see on TV and movies, the way you celebrate is with alcohol. That's the way the world celebrates, is with alcohol. So how can I say I'll never taste it, and I'll never partake of it, and I'll never get hooked on it, when on the plus side, in terms of positive side, there's plenty of celebrations. There's holidays and there's birthdays, and that's the occasion when many people bring out the alcohol. Or on the flip side, Hollywood paints the picture that when you're going through a tough time, where do you go? To a bar. Whether you're an old cowboy going to the saloon, or whether you got some ritzy bar in a restaurant. Hollywood paints the picture. If you want to drown your sorrows, if you broke up with your girlfriend, then you go to a bar. So Hollywood paints the picture when you're down and out, depressed, discouraged, had a bad day, had a rough week, you go to a bar. So in the midst of the opportunities to celebrate with it, in the midst of opportunities to get in the mully grubs with it, how can you say you never partake of it? Because there was never a pre-existing appetite. And as long as I don't open the door to it, there will never be a pre-existing appetite. Now, what about, and my brother brought it up, and I told him we will get to this today. What about the curiosity? What about the curiosity? How does it taste? What's it like? You asked that question, and I said we had to stop and we didn't get to it. So we're picking up with it first thing tonight. What about the curiosity? Well, let me give you an example again related to me. In 2018, I resigned from Fat Jack's in Walterboro, where I had worked there for 9 years. 2 years in the current location, 7 years when they were over by the movie theater, when it was Fat Jack's Grilling and Chilling. Over there, I had a managerial position up front, but when things got busy, I helped bus tables, I helped do whatever we needed to because we had a party waiting, and I got to hurry and get this table cleared. The waitresses are busy serving food, and I had to help jump in and bus tables. When we went to the new building, I was in the back in the kitchen expediting. But because I had to bus tables, I had to pick up wine bottles, take them to the bar. Wine glasses, take them to the bar. I had to pick up beer bottles, put them in the bus pan and take them back there. I had to deal with it and I got exposed to it. Okay? But I was never tempted to taste it. Despite the ads on TV. Cool, crisp, taste of the mountains. Pop open a cold one. No. Why? Because there was never an appetite for it. Now, the curiosity part. Was I ever the least bit curious? What is it like? What does it taste like? What does 1 or 2 beers do to you? What does having several do to you? What is a buzz like? Was there ever the least little bit of curiosity? What is it that people find so exhilarating about this? Was there ever even the curiosity, wondering what it was like? Okay, well, you heard the phrase, curiosity killed the cat. Y'all heard that phrase, right? Do you know where it came from? It originated in 1598 as the phrase, care killed a cat. And it was written by a playwright by the name of Ben Jonson, because care represented any kind of worry, anxiety, sorrow that can wear somebody down. So you can be worn down from sorrow, grief, you could be worn down from anxiety, depression, and it could really wear you down to the point of you're about dead. Then in the 1800s, curiosity replaced the word care. So instead of care killed the cat, now it's curiosity killed the cat. And an Irish newspaper brought it back to life in 1868 when they used the phrase, they say curiosity killed a cat once. Okay? So if nothing else, we're educating you on where this phrase came from. All right? Well, it's a proverb that warns of the dangers of unnecessary investigation or unnecessary experimentation. That's what the proverb does. It's warning you. Be careful what you investigate. Be careful what you experiment with. As far as the investigation is concerned, somebody may say that when somebody's sticking their nose into somebody else's business. Is stop asking too many questions or stop prying into matters or things that don't concern you. Because that curiosity killed the cat. Okay? Well, along the same lines, do you realize there was a rest of that phrase? Curiosity killed the cat. The rest of it is, but satisfaction brought it back. Or some will say, but truth brought it back. So what it's suggesting is yeah, the curiosity to investigate, the curiosity to experiment can get you into trouble. However, when you discover the truth, the thrill of finding out the answer is worth the risk. That's what the phrase means. It means you're running a risk when you investigate and stick your nose into somewhere that don't concern you. You know, you get your hand, bit if you stick it in there in that cage. Okay, you ain't got no business where it ain't got no business belonging. But it's saying that on the flip side is once you find out the truth and once you find out an answer, well, it was well worth the risk. That's what the proverb says. Okay, so experimentation. Now let's bring it back to the spiritual matter. This is where faith comes in. And where the lack of it results in sin. Because if you go back, as we will in Genesis chapter 3 in just a second, when you go back to the beginning, when God instructed Adam, from all the trees you may freely eat, but the one in the midst of the garden, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, you shall not eat of it, for the day that you eat of it, you will surely die. Okay? What he was saying to him was this. He was saying, are you willing to take me at my word? That if you eat it, it'll kill you. Are you willing to take me at my word, or do you feel the need to see for yourself and investigate or experiment? Will the curiosity kill you, the cat? Or can you just take me at my word when I tell you it's not good for you? You're opening up a can of worms. You have no idea the risk involved by experimenting or investigating, acting on your curiosity. And there is no thrill that's going to come from finding out the truth. Will you take me at my word without checking it out, seeing for yourself? And that's where Adam failed. He didn't take God at his word. Fast forward. Resurrection evening. Jesus appears to the disciples. He appears to 10 of the disciples plus the Emmaus 12. Who's missing? Thomas. So after Jesus appears to them and they get born again, they meet up with Thomas, and it says in verse 25 of John 20, so the other disciples were saying to him, Thomas, we've seen the Lord. But he said to them, unless I see in his hands the imprint of the nails, and put my finger into the place of the nails, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe. I won't believe it unless I see it. I won't believe it unless I investigate. I won't believe it unless I experiment. My curiosity is what takes the lead here, is what Thomas is saying. I got to see it for myself before I believe it. When Jesus did appear to him 8 days later, Jesus said in verse 29, Jesus said to him, because you have seen me, have you now believed? Is that what it takes? Does it take investigation? Does it take experimentation for you to believe what I'm telling you? I would prefer that you take me at my word to begin with. And he says, blessed are those who did not see, yet did still believe. Now, about the curiosity about alcohol. Was there a curiosity? Yes. Just curious. What do y'all like about that stuff? I mean, what makes the taste of Coors versus Bud? What's the difference between Bud and Bud Light? What's the difference between Michelob and Michelob Ultra? I mean, is there ever a curiosity? What's the difference? I mean, I can understand the difference between Coke and Mountain Dew, but what's the difference? It all looks the same. It all looks golden in color. It all comes from hops. What's the difference? Is it because it's brewed in the mountains like Coors? What's the difference? Was there a curiosity? Yes. But what kept me from going one step further to check it out and experiment? What kept me personally? I can only vouch for myself. You can testify about similar matters in your testimony. Okay, this is my testimony. Okay, so let's roll with it. All right. Well, number one, naturally speaking, Naturally speaking, this is just me. You got to understand, I am not OCD, but I will claim some OCB, obsessive compulsive behavior. I have no disorder, but I may do have some obsessive compulsive behavior. And there's sometimes I like to refrain from things just to keep the streak alive. See what I'm saying? So naturally speaking, I didn't ever want to try it because I wanted to, as a preacher, to be able to testify you like I am now. I've never tasted it. I wanted to keep the streak alive. Okay? Spiritually, I knew that others were watching me. And if they saw me as so much as take a sip, then that would give the devil license to put in their mind, see, the preacher drinks. And whereas all I did was sample, like a Costco sample size, a swig, then they would use it as reason or excuse to go drink and do it in excess. And that would make me a stumbling block. So spiritually speaking, I'm not going to be a stumbling block. I had guys that worked in the kitchen that I was real good friends with. They were my fantasy football buddies, and some of them to this day. I mean, some of them to this day. And I'll go and confess to you so because if y'all hear about it, I'll go and confess to you. Saturday afternoon, I have my annual fantasy football draft in Waterbury. And I guarantee you, I'm the only saved person there. Okay? So the preacher will be eating with tax collectors and publicans. Okay? All right? It's our fantasy football draft. And they call me preacher. But I got news for you. If they got a problem, they call him the preacher. So it is an outreach for me. Because they do look to me. And they will ask me questions. I had one last night texting me. And I have people do that. So I'm going to go hang out with them. Will there be alcohol there? Yeah, probably. Now, they won't be flaunting it right in front of me and everything. But I'm sure they got it in a cooler somewhere. And as soon as I leave, they go bust it out and spend the rest of the night, rejoicing over the team they drafted, okay? All right? But the point is that I wouldn't dare partake of it because then that would be a stumbling block to them. But thirdly, it's ultimately based on the fact of never having developed an appetite to prompt a strong enough appeal. There's no appetite to even curiosity can't make me want to do it. Okay? Had I experimented even so much as once as a kid, there could be a dormant appetite that had been suppressed, that had been dormant for decades, that the devil could prey upon. And even though I got saved since, my spirit is sealed, but in the back of my mind is a memory of what it tasted like. You see what I'm saying? That's why he says your mind's got to be renewed. And there could be that fleshly appetite in the sense that, if I try it, I could be cool with everybody else. They would accept me if I participated. See what I'm saying? So there's a fleshly appeal. But there was never such that, and if that was the case, then I probably would have faced, even at the restaurant, an in-your-face serious temptation. But because there wasn't, I didn't. Now, how can I say I never will? Just like you could say you never will partake of whatever. I mean, many of you married ones who've been married for all these years. Likewise, you could say, I never, ever will commit adultery. Hey, I believe you. You've been faithful to your wife. You're married to your childhood sweetheart. You were faithful to before then. She was the love of your life. She's the only one you've ever been with. And you'll never, ever, ever step out on her. Well, you can have the same declaration because there was never an appetite earlier in your life to do that. You see what I'm saying? So it's not just the alcohol thing. It could be, infidelity. In order for me not to be tempted, or you not to be tempted, either the appetite never existed, or through grace, it has been fully extinguished. It's been crucified. You are dead to it. Many of you can testify, and some of you have, that used to be part of your life, but when you got saved, that divine nature changed and you never, ever picked it up again. Why? You fully extinguished the appetite. And we're going to show you in this series how we crucify and extinguish appetites, regardless of what it is. So, in order to partake, whether it's me of alcohol, or whether one of you who've been married for 40, 50 years, for y'all to be tempted to, step out on your wife, for me to drink alcohol, in order for that to happen, the unthinkable to happen, you would have to be presented with and cleverly tricked into believing a lie that something is good for you and is beneficial to you. You'd have to be cleverly tricked. When did this occur? In Genesis chapter 3, in Eden. How many times have you heard Genesis 3 preached and it's referred to as the first temptation? How can it be a temptation when they never had a pre-existing appetite? They had never grew up, so to speak, nibbling at the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So now as adults, they're tempted to eat of it. No, there was no pre-existing appetite. So how could it be a temptation? They were first tested. And we're going to keep beating this to death. There's a big difference between being tested and a temptation. For it to be a temptation, there has to be a pre-existing appetite. If there's no pre-existing appetite, there's a test to see if you'll open the door. Okay? So in some areas, we are tested. In other areas, we're tempted. I can be tested to eat smelly collard greens, but I'm tempted to eat that fried pork chop. You see what I'm saying? It's the difference. Okay? Now, may I suggest to you, Adam nor Eve, neither one, for however long the tree was there, before the serpent came into the picture and started talking. See, until he started talking, there was nothing to it. The tree was there, and they just ignored it. Until he started yakking and tries to convince them that it's good for them, that it's beneficial for them. So there was no pre-existing appetite, so there was no temptation. So in order for there to be temptation, you got to open the door in the test. So now he comes to test to see if you'll open the door. And if you open the door, now he can tempt. Do you understand? Okay. So you got to be cleverly tricked in believing a lie. To experimenting. Curiosity kills the cat. Thinking the tree would make them like God. We'll be much wiser than we are now. They were already like God. Okay? So you got to believe a lie. And just remember the phrase. You believe a lie, you empower a liar. You believe a lie, you empower the liar. In Genesis chapter 3, Satan is presented as a serpent. In Revelation chapter 12, verses 3 and 4, he's presented as a dragon. Okay? Now, my brother and I were talking about this the other day because I attended a conference a week ago Friday night. I attended a conference, a men's conference, and they had different speakers, and I was listening to a few sessions, and one of the speakers said this. Now this is how people can take a principle and they can get off at the error, but they present it as the truth because they like to feel like I'm presenting something nobody else has taught you. I have to battle that when I'm teaching this here. I don't want to get prideful and get over an error because I just want to introduce you something you've never heard before. No. And this guy said this. This guy said, this is a minister. This guy said, and this is what he believes. He says he could see Eve walking along the seashore, and this big dragon just came up out of the water and started talking to her. I said, no way. When I heard that, I said, as soon as this session's over, I'm going. And I did. I walked out after that session. I was done. Because, obviously, as part of the curse, it says, on your belly shall you go. You don't see dragons crawling around on their belly. But what the guy just didn't understand is this. He had a lack of revelation. Is the enemy is presented as a serpent in the first book of the Bible. He's presented as a dragon in the last book of the Bible, to illustrate that he's picked up steam, that he's gained in size and power over the thousands of years. He has no authority. Jesus took it all away from him on the cross. But he does have power. Where does he get it from? Man. When we believe a lie, we empower the liar. It's not like physical power. It is power to influence. You open the door, now I can tempt. That's the power to tempt. So he's a puny little serpent because he hadn't even tested them yet, much less tempted them then. But in the end, he's tempted so many people, now he's presented as a dragon. You see the difference? Okay. But you see how some people can get off in error. All right, Genesis chapter 3 and verse 1. Now the serpent, not the dragon, the serpent, the snake, who used to walk up on his hind legs like the Geico lizard. Okay? It was after the curse, on your belly you will slither. But he used to be just like that Geico lizard. All right? Now the serpent was more crafty than any beast of the field, which who? Yahweh God had made. Okay? And he said to the woman, indeed, has God said? Notice he presents it as a question. More on that in a moment. You shall not eat from any tree of the garden. The woman said to the serpent, from the fruit of the trees of the garden we may eat. But from the fruit of the tree which is in the middle of the garden. Why is it in the middle? Because all of us are going to face a challenge, a presentation in the middle of our life. So in the middle of the garden, God has said, you shall not eat from it or touch it, or you will die. Now, stop right there. We've taught on this before. What does she say? But from the fruit of the tree which is in the middle of the garden, so far so good. But the moment she says God, she uses Elohim. The devil says, I got you. Because you don't know him as Yahweh. You do not have a covenant relationship with him. You know him as Elohim. That's how I know him as Elohim. You don't know him any better than I do. So I got you. So now he can proceed. Because she doesn't have revelation. Okay? God has said, you shall not eat from it nor touch it. God never said anything about touching it. See, religion adds to it. Just like the dragon issue. Religion just adds to it to make the story look good. She's saying we're not supposed to eat of it, we're not supposed to touch it. No, God never said you can't touch it. Probably not advised to, but he just said don't eat of it. I mean, if you walk by and brushed up against it, don't get into condemnation thinking, no, you just touched it. But she adds the word touch it. For God, and then the serpent said to the woman, you surely will not die. Well, there's the lie. God says in the day you eat of it, you will die. It was Adam's responsibility to adamantly, no pun intended, yeah, pun intended, to adamantly relay the message to her. Okay? We cannot eat of that tree. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts. Woman, do you hear me? We cannot eat of that tree. Do you understand the words coming out of my mouth? You know, don't eat of that tree. Okay? He evidently didn't clearly make it absolutely understandable to her because she has the word touch it. So he says, for God knows that in the day you eat from it, your eyes will be open and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. There's the other lie. The lie that says God's keeping something from you. God's hiding something from you. God don't want you to know this secret. So he's saying God's keeping something back from you. God's hiding something from you. Again, what is he doing? He's trying to prey on their curiosity. Aren't you curious as to why he doesn't want you to eat of it? After all, you said in the day you eat of it, you will be like God. Aren't you curious what that would feel like? Aren't you curious how different that would make you? Okay? But it ain't worth the risk. Okay? Move on. That's the first thing. But see, the sales pitch must come first. If you don't bite on the sales pitch, and if she hadn't been on the sales pitch, if the curiosity didn't kill the cat, if she didn't bite on the sales pitch, it would not have opened the door to keep on and to present the appeal. There's the presentation, then there's the appeal. Okay? But see, once it was achieved, once she opened the door and believed a lie, she failed the test. Now the devil had the legal right to come in and tempt. As a result, up until this moment, that tree was not the least bit appealing to him. That tree, the leaves on that tree looked like collard greens to him. Okay? The leaves on that tree, I'm talking about to me, collard greens. That's what it looked like. It is not the least bit appealing. Okay? But the moment she believed a lie, hey, that'd be good for you. Hey, that'd be beneficial. Hey, that'll make you feel better. Take this shortcut, it'll make you feel better. Take this alcohol to drown your sorrows, it'll make you feel better. Take these drugs to, get rid of your thoughts about losing your girlfriend. That'll be beneficial to you. Once you're presented with the lie and you believe a lie, then we open up the door. Notice verse 6. When the woman saw that the tree was good for food, now she sees that it's good for food. Before, there was no, hey, I wonder if that fruit on that tree is any good. I wonder if it's delicious. The Bible says nothing about there being any kind of curiosity as to whether or not it was good for food until now. Until now. Okay? And it says, when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and it was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was desirable to make one wise, it lines up with 1 John 2:16, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life. She took from its fruit and ate. She took from its fruit and ate. 1 Timothy 2:14 says, and it was not Adam who was deceived, but the woman being deceived fell into transgression. You say, well, is Adam off the hook? Oh, no. Adam wasn't deceived. Adam rebelled. He knew better and did it anyway. She didn't fully know better because he didn't adequately relay the message to her. So it made her the vulnerable one to make the presentation to. And he did. 2 Corinthians 11:3, he says, but I'm afraid that, Paul says, as the serpent, not the dragon, as the serpent deceived Eve by his craftiness, your minds will be led astray from the simplicity and purity of devotion to Christ. And it says, and she gave to her husband with her, and they ate. And we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. Then the eyes of both of them were open, and they knew that they were naked. And they sewed fig leaves, that's why we assume it was a fig, not an apple, together and made themselves loin coverings. So you see there was a seeing in appeal to prey on the curiosity. Then once the curiosity killed the cat, the investigation, the experimentation wasn't worth the risk. Curiosity did kill the cat in Genesis chapter 3. Because now their eyes were opened up to the wrong tree. The glory which they were covered with vanished, and they now knew they were naked. And you know the rest of the story. It says, so...
Adam ate from the fruit too.
Huh?
Adam ate too.
Adam ate too. Oh yeah. It says, and she gave also to her husband with her, and he ate. See, nothing happened when she ate. It's only when he ate, everything changed.
So why did he say, why did you eat that?
That's a very good question. He should have stepped in. he should have stepped in. So
Someone would have told me I was wrong.
well, I was thinking, say, do you listen to Brother John when he steps in and says, hey, you ain't got no business eating that sweet? I'm just kidding.
You'd eat it too, just like that soft serve ice cream.
In other words, you said you would eat it, you would have given it to him, and he'd eat it too.
He'd eat that soft
Okay.
serve ice cream.
But see, it's no different. It's no different than you not having read the label and fully, and you just know what he says. Oh, there's a little bit of sugar and some whatever in there. And he didn't really tell you all the ingredients in there, and you didn't read the label. Okay, but he knows what the label says. Okay, so you were deceived into thinking, oh, this is really good for you. You go and eat a big dish of it. He knew better already, so it didn't. Then nothing changed when you ate of it. But when he ate of it,
But if I don't get a bite, I'm in trouble.
yeah. But
I better eat some of it.
see, the first is the appeal and the presentation. Then the second seeing is the reveal when you eat of the wrong tree. And it is the uh-oh, I done stepped in it now. I now see what he was trying to tell me all along. It's not good and beneficial for me. That was a lie from the devil. I believed the lie that opened up the door to go from a test. I failed the test. Now I face the temptation. If you pass the test, you don't face the temptation. If she would have passed the test and said, it is written, and quoted word for word exactly what Adam said that God said, and it was word for word. If she knew the word 100% that Adam knew, but still partook, if she knew it and she said, it is written, just like Jesus did in the wilderness. Whereas she failed, Jesus passed with flying colors. And he said, it is written. And if she'd have quoted it exactly, don't throw in the word touch, she would have told him exactly. She'd have passed the test. He would have had to go on about his business. Okay? See, when the tree looked good for food, see, beforehand, just like the fried, greasy meats are not the least bit appealing to my wife. That greasy pork chop is not the least bit appealing to her. But that fat around it, she'd be like, no. It would take somebody cleverly tricking her into believing that that is nutritious and beneficial for her. And the only person on the face of the earth that I can think of right now that could probably convince her of that would be Joanna Gaines. If she opens up her Joanna Gaines cookbook and it says nutritional values of a fried pork chop. Okay? So Joanna could probably make a good, curiosity appealing argument for her to suddenly say, okay, we're going to start frying and we're going to have fried pork chops. Because after all, Joanna Gaines says it has such nutritional value. She's lying through her teeth. But she believes a lie. Now she gets hooked on fried pork chops. You get the point. But see, it was before, it was a test to her, but it's a temptation to me because I've got a pre-existing appetite for those greasy pork chops. So if it's put in front of me, I'm going to be tempted to eat. If it's on a buffet, I'm getting some. She could walk right on by it, go down there and fix her a salad and think nothing of it. Just like they walked right on by that tree in the midst of the garden, didn't think any of it. Then one day, that serpent called Joanna Gaines comes in there and says, doesn't this thing look appealing to you? And presented it in such a way. Then suddenly it looked pleasant, but it wasn't pleasant before. Suddenly it was desirable, but it wasn't desirable before. That's the lie.
But it didn't kill him.
It didn't kill him immediately, naturally, but yes it did, because it killed him spiritually initially, right off the bat. But
it might have got Adam's attention.
But they were created to live forever. And see, Adam lived to be 930 years old. So he was going to live forever. Everybody else was going to live forever. But when they ate of it, they did die. Physically, they died and they started to decay. They started to feel the aches and pains of aging. They started feeling the bones cracking and the arthritis, and all that came in when they opened up the door. See, curiosity killed the cat in that regard, because that experimentation and that investigation opened their eyes to something, and it did not, as we said the rest of the phrase, but the satisfaction of knowing the answer didn't make up for it. It made matters exponentially worse. Okay? So the first test, if you will, was not to eat of the tree. That was not the first test. That's why you don't see it called the temptation. You know, this is the book of the temptation in Genesis chapter 3. Here is the first temptation known to man. You know, Adam and Eve, blah, blah, blah. No. Why does it say that? Okay? Because she had to believe a lie and fail the test for it to be a temptation. What was the first test? It wasn't to eat. The first test was, do you know what God said? That was the first test. Because what is the first thing out of the serpent's mouth? Has God said? The first thing out of his mouth wasn't, look at that tree. The first thing out of his mouth was, has God said? So the way to pass the test is to know what God said. If you don't know what God said, it makes you vulnerable for your curiosity to be piqued. Okay? Ephesians chapter 5 and verse 18, we read where it says, do not be getting drunk with wine, for that is dissipation, but be being filled with Holy Spirit. Imagine someone so strong in the Spirit, as was Jesus. Imagine someone so full of the Word, as was Jesus, that he would never fall for such a ploy. He would never fall for such a lie. Imagine that, because that was Jesus. Okay? Well, as a preview to what we will be getting into next week and in the coming weeks, there is one Greek word that it is interchangeably used and translated tempt, and it's also translated test. It's the same Greek word. But because some translators don't understand what we're teaching, they will translate it tempt when it's test, or they'll translate it test when it's tempt. But it's the same Greek word. It is initially a neutral term that could swing either way. It's in the Greek, it is a one Greek word that can be a test for somebody, and the same Greek word can be a temptation to the other. The difference is there a pre-existing appetite? But it's the same word. And I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you where it says, and Jesus tested so-and-so. I don't want to give it away yet. I'm going to show you in the Word where it said God tested one of the forefathers. And in both cases, it's not a negative connotation to tempt, because James 1 says God cannot be tempted and he does not tempt anyone. So it has to be test when it's used of what God did and when it's used of what Jesus did. And Jesus put his disciples to test. And it says he did this to test them. It says in the Old Testament, even in Exodus, we read it in chapter 20 and verse 20. He says, God brought you into the wilderness and put you here to test you. Not to tempt you, to test you. God doesn't tempt, as we said on Sunday a week ago, but God will test you. But for some people, it's a test, and it may be a test administered by God, or it could be a test like the serpent initially did to Eve to see if you know the Word. I'm going to give you a written test, just like a school teacher does. Do you know the material? I'm going to give you a test. If I grade it and you don't know the material, now I can tempt you. But if you slam the door shut because you know the Word, you don't get tempted in it, because you pass the test. And again, it all depends upon the heart condition. And I will say this for those who did not hear this the last time. I said it because I want to say the last time I said it was on a Sunday morning. And I'll use this illustration and we'll stop. And I can get it done in 2 minutes. We talk about going to the grocery store. When Ann and I go to the grocery store, and if we're in a hurry to get the groceries and get on out and get on back home, she'll say, okay, I'm going to the produce section, get what I need, and I'll say, I'll go get the canned goods and whatever else we need. I'll go get the milk and the cheese and whatever else. I'll get the dairy stuff. You go get the produce. And then we'll meet back up. We'll find each other and meet back up. And it's usually not as difficult, even though she is short, so sometimes it is hard to see her and find her and everything. But say, for instance, I'm walking down an aisle, and it's only me, and in front of me is this lady pushing a buggy. And this lady pushes a buggy, and she reaches into her purse to get her grocery list out. And she drops a wad of cash on the ground. And she keeps on going. I look at that wad of cash, and I'm sitting there thinking, that'll buy our groceries and then some. Because it looks like a wad of cash there. So, I'm going to pretend to be reading labels here, and there's nobody in either other direction other than her. And if she'll keep on going and go around and go to the next aisle, I can go pick up that cash and put it in my pocket. So I'm going to pretend to read labels and keep checking to see if she moves. Okay? Meanwhile, my wife, I'm not saying this didn't really happen, I'm making it up. Okay? Meanwhile, my wife comes down the aisle. My wife comes down the aisle, and she spied the lady going around the corner. And my wife spies the cash. And she runs up there and grabs it, and she goes, Miss. Oh, ma'am. You dropped some cash. And she's like, oh, thank you. I didn't bring my debit card with me, and I had to pay for my grocery list. Thank you so much. Okay? What's the point as we close? I saw the cash. She saw the cash. But only one of us was tempted. She wasn't, but I was. Because my heart condition was a pre-existing appetite for money. But she had no pre-existing appetite for it, so she could get it and try to find who it rightfully belongs to. You see the difference? Both of us saw the cash, but only one of us was tempted. Both of us saw the fried pork chop, but only one of us was tempted. Okay? Do you get the point? And we're going to reiterate, if you can stand on the word and you know what God said about a matter, thou shalt not commit adultery. You know God said that. I'm not stepping on my wife. Jesus says, if you look upon a woman in lust, you've already committed adultery with her in your heart. I'm not going to be lusting after another woman. Well, when the presentation is made to you, it is written. And you quote the word. And you pass the test, and therefore we're not tempted. Amen?